With help from an eager platoon of volunteers, Noel and Trish Butler are taking the first steps back on a long road to recovery. The day they lost nearly everything is seared forever in their minds.
We did come out here a couple of hours before, maybe even 1 hour before, to collect some more items. Noel wanted to hose everything down again, and
you said no.
I said no, something doesn't feel right. And I think it was only like an hour later that this all came through. And we are so fortunate that we weren't here, because you would not survive.
We'd never got out of here.
Before the fire, their now denuded valley looked like this. Lush, green, home to some friendly marsupials. Their little patch of paradise, and even more. Noel Butler is a proud Budawang elder, a famous artist, teacher, and practitioner of Aboriginal culture. Their home was also a widely known educational center focused on history and traditions that date back more than 100,000 years. With the fire approaching, they frantically filled this shipping container with artwork, tools, and ancient artifacts, hoping they would be protected. But this is all that survived. Is it kind of hard to fathom it all?
It still is. I don't know, I guess it's still a bit surreal, but we're here and we're looking at it.
And we're alive.
And we're alive, and we're very grateful for that.
The bunker gear is hung and dry at the Bairnsdale Fire Department in East Gippsland, Australia. For now, the calm after the firestorm, 10 days earlier. Captain Aaron Lee, his 12-year-old son Ryan in tow, took me to the spot in nearby Sarsfield, where they waited and watched the flames approach.
We had a lot of vehicles parked here in the 1st December as like a first rally point. Fire was putting up a fair bit of smoke straight out ahead of us. So, plume was coming. Looking at the fire, we're basically looking at the fire, yeah.
Nearby, the fire is still smoldering in a peat bog. When it roared in, it took 20 homes. But Lee and his brigade, all volunteers who left their own families and homes behind, worked tirelessly, saving countless others while constantly facing instant decisions on where to take a stand.
I think you have to protect the assets where possible with what resources you've got. And sometimes assets aren't defendable. We literally have to go, well, sorry, we can't defend that because it's too risky for us. So.
At the command post, firefighters still have their hands full, coordinating the fight against uncontained wildfires covering a huge swath of southeast Australia. Brett Mitchell is the incident commander here.
We've been fighting these fires since November, so fatigue is a real issue we have to manage. We do have teams coming in from Canada and the United States to give us a bit of relief, which is great. I really appreciate that assistance. Lightning can start new fires as well, so we're not only dealing with these particular fires, but quite often, given we're in January, we can get over 100 new fires start.
Across the country so far this fire season, more than 24 million acres have burned, killing 24, destroying 2,000 homes. The fires have also taken a terrible toll on wildlife, injuring and killing millions of the unique species that live on this island continent.
It's a possum. We just pulled him out of the fire.
One scientist estimates perhaps 1 billion could be dead, but no one really knows for sure. Fresh out of veterinary school in August, Caitlin McFadden is enduring a taxing trial by fire.
Oh, I know.
This little guy is an Australian possum, a marsupial related to kangaroos who has earned the name Hissy Pants. He's got good reason to make all the fuss. His paws are burnt and bloody after a fast-moving fire ripped through his home in the Conjola National Park in southeastern Australia.
The blood and the horrible looking of the paws is actually a good thing because it means that there's new cell growth, essentially. Healthy tissue. We're seeing healing, yeah.
Hissy is one of about 20 animals injured in this season's record fires that have made their way here to the Milton Veterinary Clinic.
I know we've all had a little bit of a cry about animals, especially the ones that come in when straight away you just know that that's it. There's nothing you can possibly do to help them.
Sally Sherwin is Director of Wildlife Conservation and Science at Zoos Victoria.
So a lot of these species that live in these habitats that have already been at critically low numbers as a result of other threats in the landscape and fragmented populations. They were already at very low, vulnerable levels, and one event like this does have the potential to completely wipe them out.
In the meantime, a small army of committed volunteers is doing what it can to help orphaned and injured animals. Doug Thron is a California-based professional drone pilot and environmentalist.
I kept seeing the feed coming up on the news of the burned up koalas, and I was like, well, I'm going to Australia, I'm sure, because, yeah, it literally actually, yeah, it brought me to tears to see the little koalas all burned up.
So now he is helping find animals in need here using his one-of-a-kind drone. This kangaroo appears to be nursing burnt paws, but by the time vets with tranquilizer guns got there, they could not find the animal. Hopefully, good news. In several other cases, Doug Thron's drone, able to detect the heat signatures of animals, has led to speedy rescues.
The most important part of an infrared drone is it shaves off a huge amount of time, and it also allows accessibility where a human couldn't readily walk into. After a hurricane or a fire, that's the most important part, is getting to animals as quick as possible, because oftentimes they're going to die very quickly if somebody doesn't save them.
Somebody like Lorna King, a passionate animal lover in Bairnsdale, Victoria. She is nursing back to health an 11-month-old koala named Rivers.
He was just wandering along on his own, no mother in sight, so he was picked up by the rangers from the department and brought into the vet to be checked out. They said no, except for that tiny burn, he's fine.
Lorna is a well-regarded, licensed animal rescue expert. The fires have kept her on the run. All kinds of wildlife are crawling out of the burned forest looking for food and shelter. The day we met her, she was responding to a nervous homeowner with a snake in his garden.
See right below it?
Yeah.
That's where it keeps going in and out.
Okay, here he comes. It's only his head again, it's all right.
Hopefully, that's what I'm concerned about, Lorna.
She made quick work of it.
It's okay. It's okay, mate. It's a nice little red belly black. We'll kill you in a minute.
It's just one more reminder of the scope of this disaster.
I said to a friend of mine the other day, you know, how can we correct all this? I was feeling despair, and I said, you know, will we ever get it back? And he said, yes, but it will take a long time. Because it's just ruined. Everything's gone, everything.
At least Rivers will likely survive and find his way back to some unburned bush. In the meantime, he was content to spend a little time in my lap. A sweet reminder of what is so precious and in such peril here. These are gray-headed flying foxes, one of the world's largest bat species. They are threatened, their numbers on a precipitous decline, mostly due to lost habitat.
They're not doing great, they are protected, but this summer has been a disaster and we may have lost between 10 and 20% of the remaining species.
Megan Davidson is CEO of a conservation group called Wildlife Victoria. Flying foxes are particularly sensitive to heat. Record-setting temperatures this summer in the midst of a 3-year drought prompted a huge die-off of these animals, even before the worst of the fires.
Some unimaginable amount of forest has been burned. We're, waiting to see what that means for the survival of this species in the next few months.
Flying foxes are pollinators that travel great distances, much farther than honeybees, meaning they play a critical role in rejuvenating blackened forests. In some ways, fire-scarred forests bounce back quickly, but it is more complex and much slower than I thought.
We assume that the bush bounces back, we see the green returning to the forest, but some of the critical assets that the animals need will take centuries to get back.
Fire ecologist Mike Clark is a professor of zoology at La Trobe University in Melbourne. He showed me why many species won't be returning to the charred forests anytime soon. Their homes are gone and not easily replaced.
These are the kinds of hollows that are crucial as den sites or as refuges for native wildlife in Australia. But we don't have anything like a woodpecker that can create a hollow.
Without woodpeckers, tree limbs are hollowed out only with fungus and termites. And here, most of the trees are hardwood eucalypts.
So just to grow to that size of a log, you're probably looking at least 100 years. Then it falls off the tree and the termites and the fungi have to do their bit hollowing it out. And you might be looking at another 50 or 100 years.
A new generation of trees will also have a hard time taking root. Acacia trees bear tough armored seeds that are dependent on fire. That is hard as it can be.
What it requires to germinate is for the seed coat to be broken, and that only happens typically after fire.
But the climate emergency is making bushfires more frequent. Not enough time for the trees to mature enough to produce seeds.
This is different. Fires have been more extensive, more intense, and more frequent. And all of those attributes of fire are crucially important in terms of what the fauna have evolved to cope with. We've changed the dials, and we can't expect them to simply adapt. That's not how evolution works.
For Noel Butler, the loss is a poignant reminder of the lessons of ancient Aboriginal history. Fire is a part of a natural cycle in the forests of Australia.
This whole continent is designed to burn. And 80% of our flora needs and benefits from fire to regerminate the seeds, crack the seed pods, or regenerate.
His ancestors used that insight to their advantage by setting low-intensity fires, prescribed burns, carefully considered and controlled.
When you think for 100,000 years, you know, Aboriginal people, how long we've kept this in such perfect environment by managing it correctly, by the use of fire, by burning it when it needs to, and knowing when animals live where, you never interfere with the breeding cycle.
As Australia burns this horrible historic summer, there is much debate about land management or mismanagement. Noel Butler is among those who wonder if a return to the Aboriginal practices might have deprived the megafires of fuel, reducing their intensity. Perhaps.
It's not the panacea people are hoping for.
Large-scale forest thinning and controlled burning is widely recognized as a good idea, but it is neither cheap nor easy to implement.
No, it's not. Australia has changed profoundly. We've added another 20 million people to the landscape. We've got infrastructure all over the countryside of bridges and power lines and reservoirs. We can't simply have large-scale burning that may have been possible when Indigenous folk are in charge.
The unprecedented fires come amid record drought and heat.
Yeah, the fire season of 2019 in Australia is really a perfect storm of climate events, to be honest with you.
Lyndon Ashcroft is a historical climatologist at the University of Melbourne. She says a stronger than normal shifting ocean current called the Indian Ocean Dipole is at play. Like El Niño in the Pacific, the dipole changes winds and sea surface temperatures. This year, it has blown warmer water toward Africa, allowing colder water to surface near Australia. The colder air there contains less moisture and fewer clouds, creating drought conditions. Meanwhile, the air above Antarctica became unusually warm, which triggers windier conditions for Australia. And all of this happens as the climate steadily warms.
We had tinder dry forests, we had really strong winds, we had a temperature or a climate that's a degree warmer than it was 60 years ago. And all of those things combined just made it exactly right for a devastating bushfire season.
David Caroli is a climate scientist with the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, Australia's national science agency.
2019 was the hottest year in recorded history in Australia, hotter than any other year, and it was also record low rainfall. It didn't start the fires, it didn't light the fires, but it provided the background environment for extreme fire danger.
Australia generates 80% of its electricity with coal and gas. It is the world's third largest exporter of fossil fuels. The country's Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has a long history of skepticism and denial of climate science. But with the fires raging, he is now saying he hopes to evolve climate change policy. Amanda McKenzie is a leading advocate for action on climate change in Australia.
The fires have changed everything. We don't know just how much that has impacted people yet, but the trauma will go on for some time, and I think it will fundamentally change how Australians look at the issue of climate change, but it also will change how we look at the federal government.
The media here is dominated by Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation. It usually omits or discredits the impact of climate change.
This is not chasing facts and applying rational scrutiny. This is an insult to our intelligence.
Instead, it focuses on arson statistics and falsely alleges environmentalists are to blame for blocking controlled burning.
They've not been constrained by some mythical, powerful green movement. They've been constrained by climate change and the weather. The window in which you can do safe, controlled burning has got shorter and shorter. It's either too dry and it's dangerous to light a controlled burn, or it's too wet, you can't get the darn thing to ignite. And the window in which you can safely do it is down to handfuls of days in spring and autumn.
Concern that facts like those are not getting enough public attention prompted sociologist David Holmes to find an alternative means of communication: TV weathercasters.
And why they are important is because not only are they trusted, but they also are skilled communicators and they have access to a very big audience. You see them every day on your television screens, you get to know them, and they are skilled at talking about climate change. They are the most important people to communicate the science.
Holmes and his team from the Monash Climate Change Communications Research Hub are developing presentations linking weather events to climate change for 14 Australian weather presenters, reaching a third of the nation so far.
Our average daytime temperature for September was 24.9 degrees. This is an increase on the long-term average, which is quite substantial when you look at our top temperature history trend, dated back to 1995.
Weathercasters like Paul Higgins of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation say the data alone speaks volumes.
We just basically provide evidence-based scientific facts, peer-reviewed scientific facts, and present those to the audience without saying, hey, this is climate change, look what's happening. We just simply show what has happened over the last, say, 50 years, and people can then make up their own minds.
It's an important message, and they are convinced this is moving the needle on public opinion. Here in Southeast Australia, it is impossible to ignore the crisis at their front door. And while there is some evidence opinions may in fact be changing, not everyone recognizes the urgency. Do you worry about Ryan's future and what this, as the trends go up, what that might mean for living in Australia?
Yes and no. Yes, there's climate change there, but how much of it is actually having an effect on what we're doing here? Look, I base my decisions on information. If I've got the information, I'll make the decision, basically. So, you know, if I'm fed the right information, you know, yeah, look, I might be less sceptical.
And in this hot, dry, austral summer, filled with inferno after inferno, people are looking for answers while looking for the strength to start over.
It certainly is really daunting, and I have had moments where it's not that I don't want to live on this land again here on our property. It's just that whole daunting feeling of how long it's going to take at our stage in our life. But I'm pretty sure that we can bring it back. I don't want to be negative about it. I think that, you know, we're positive and we'll build it together.
Because we're still here.
This is a country on the front lines of the climate emergency. What's happening this summer could be a crystal ball to a future world. For MyRadar, I'm Miles O'Brien in southeastern Australia.